Helen Bailey, a successful author known for her work in young adult fiction, vanished without a trace in April 2016. Initially, her disappearance was treated as a missing person case, with her fiancé, Stewart, providing a concerning yet seemingly cooperative front. He claimed that Helen had voluntarily left their home in Royston, Hertfordshire, leaving behind a note that suggested she needed space. However, as time passed, doubts began to surface regarding this claim. Helen was not known for erratic behavior, and those close to her found it difficult to believe that she would abandon her life without warning. The fact that she had also left behind her beloved dog, Boris, raised additional concerns, as she was deeply attached to him. Her friends and family insisted that she would never have willingly left without Boris, casting further suspicion on the circumstances of her disappearance. The initial police investigation struggled to find substantial leads. With no forced entry, signs of struggle, or immediate evidence of foul play, the case seemed perplexing. However, authorities soon began scrutinizing the only person who seemed to benefit from Helen's absence, her fiancé, Stewart. His behavior became increasingly questionable, particularly his lack of genuine distress. Instead of actively participating in the search efforts, Stewart appeared emotionally detached, further arousing suspicions. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing web of deceit that would ultimately lead to a shocking revelation. Stewart's suspicious behavior from the moment Helen was reported missing. Stewart's behavior raised eyebrows. Typically, a fiancé faced with such a distressing situation would show desperation, grief, and an eagerness to assist authorities. However, Stewart displayed an unusual calmness that did not align with the gravity of the situation. One of the most peculiar aspects of his response was his decision to take a holiday to Spain shortly after Helen's disappearance. Instead of staying behind to aid in the search, he traveled abroad, seemingly unfazed by the fact that his partner had vanished without explanation. This lack of urgency did not go unnoticed by investigators. Why would a concerned fiancé leave the country while the woman he claimed to love was missing? Stewart avoided media appeals and community search efforts, which are common responses from loved ones of missing individuals. He did not reach out to Helen's friends or attempt to trace her movements. Instead, he remained passive, showing little initiative in helping to find her. As investigators conducted interviews, they noted inconsistencies in Stewart's statements. He struggled to recall basic details about Helen, such as the color of her eyes and even the address of their holiday home. These contradictions, coupled with his detached demeanor, painted a picture of someone who was not genuinely concerned about Helen's whereabouts. With mounting doubts, authorities shifted their focus from a missing person case to a potential crime. It was becoming increasingly clear that Stewart knew more than he was letting on. The discovery of disturbing online searches in the digital age. Technology often plays a crucial role in solving crimes, and Helen Bailey's case was no exception. As detectives intensified their investigation, they examined Stewart's online activity. What they found provided a chilling glimpse into his mindset. Authorities discovered that, in the months leading up to Helen's disappearance, Stewart had conducted online searches related to methods of disposing of a body. These searches were deeply incriminating, as they suggested premeditation. The timing of these queries coincided with Helen's unexplained vanishing, making it increasingly difficult for Stewart to claim innocence. Stewart had researched financial matters, including life insurance policies. Helen had a substantial net worth, estimated at over £3 million, and investigators found evidence suggesting that Stewart was looking into ways to access her wealth. He had inquired about power of attorney and made attempts to modify financial arrangements in his favor. These actions suggested a clear financial motive behind Helen's disappearance. The digital footprint left behind by Stewart provided critical evidence that linked him to the crime. His searches for body disposal methods and financial manipulation painted a picture of someone who was not only planning Helen's murder but also ensuring he could benefit from it. The case against him was strengthening, and it was only a matter of time before authorities took decisive action. The shocking discovery in the Cesspit on July 15, 2016. After months of investigation, police made a horrific discovery that confirmed the worst fears about Helen Bailey's fate. Acting on intelligence gathered from Stewart's inconsistent statements and suspicious behavior, they searched the couple's home, Hartwell Lodge in Royston. During this search, officers uncovered human remains hidden in a cesspit beneath the garage. The concealed chamber, covered by a concrete slab, had been deliberately chosen as a hiding place. Alongside Helen's body, investigators also found the remains of her beloved dog, Boris, The heartbreaking discovery indicated a calculated attempt to permanently erase all traces of Helen. The forensic examination of the remains revealed chilling details. Helen had been drugged with Zopiclone, a sedative commonly used to treat insomnia. Traces of the drug were found in her system, suggesting that she had been incapacitated before being murdered. The cause of death was determined to be suffocation, meaning she had been deliberately killed after being drugged. This gruesome discovery left no doubt that Helen's disappearance was not voluntary but the result of a carefully orchestrated murder. The police immediately arrested Stewart, marking a turning point in the investigation. No longer was this a missing person case, it had now become a full-fledged homicide inquiry with Stewart as the prime suspect. Stewart's arrest and initial charges just one day after the discovery of Helen Bailey's body. Police formally charged Stewart with her murder. On July 16, 2016, he was arrested and taken into custody, facing multiple charges, including murder, preventing lawful burial, and perverting the course of justice. Stewart's arrest came as a relief to Helen's family and friends, who had long suspected his involvement. However, his reaction to the charges was notable. He continued to insist on his innocence, even as the evidence against him mounted. During his initial court appearances, Stewart maintained a blank and emotionless demeanor. When presented with the evidence of his online searches, financial manipulations, and forensic findings, he did not express remorse or distress. Instead, he attempted to shift the blame, coming up with an outlandish story to explain Helen's death. Despite his denials, investigators remained steadfast in their case. The prosecution was confident that Stewart had meticulously planned the murder, ensuring that he would gain financially from Helen's death. As more details emerged, it became clear that Stewart was not just an unfortunate fiancé caught in a tragic situation, he was the architect of a cold-blooded crime. The legal battle that followed would see Stewart's lies unravel in court, as forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and financial records exposed the horrifying extent of his deception. Stewart's web of lies begins to unravel once Stewart was arrested and charged with Helen Bailey's murder. Investigators meticulously built their case, leaving no room for doubt. They pieced together Stewart's deceitful actions, starting from his initial lies about Helen's disappearance. His attempt to convince authorities that Helen had voluntarily left home with a note was soon exposed as a fabrication. Further investigations revealed that Stewart had been manipulating Helen for months before her murder. He had systematically gained control over her financial affairs, persuading her to alter her will in his favor. Helen, who was still grieving the loss of her first husband, had trusted Stewart completely. This made her an easy target for his calculated scheme. Stewart also attempted to mislead Helen's friends and family, sending fake messages from her phone to make it seem as though she was still alive. He even made excuses for her absence, claiming that she was struggling emotionally and needed time away. However, inconsistencies in these fabricated messages, such as unusual wording and abrupt communication patterns, raised red flags for those who knew Helen well. As the case progressed, forensic analysis of Stewart's electronic devices further dismantled his false narrative. His internet searches about body disposal methods, sedatives, and financial fraud painted a damning picture of premeditated murder. Each piece of evidence chipped away at his defense, reinforcing the prosecution's argument that Helen's death was a carefully orchestrated crime. By the time Stewart stood trial, the illusion he had created was completely shattered. He was no longer the grieving fiancé but an exposed manipulator with a dark, selfish motive. The trial begins. Stewart's defense strategy. Stewart's trial began in early 2017 at St. Albans Crown Court. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence against him, but Stewart continued to plead his innocence. His defense team attempted to introduce an alternative theory, claiming that Helen's death was the result of a kidnapping plot orchestrated by two mysterious men named Nick and Joe. Stewart claimed that these unknown individuals had been blackmailing Helen and had ultimately caused her death. However, this bizarre story lacked credibility. There was no evidence to support the existence of Nick and Joe, and investigators found no records, messages, or witness testimonies to back up Stewart's claims. Stewart had never mentioned this supposed blackmail before his trial, further damaging his credibility. It became clear to the jury that this was a last-ditch effort to escape justice. The prosecution dismantled his defense by highlighting the absurdity of his claims and emphasizing the strong forensic and digital evidence against him. Witnesses, including Helen's close friends and financial advisors, testified about her growing trust in Stewart and how he had taken advantage of her. They described how she had spoken of her love for Stewart, unaware that he was plotting her demise. By the time closing arguments were presented, the prosecution had left little doubt. Stewart had systematically planned Helen's murder to inherit her wealth, and his story about unknown kidnappers was nothing more than a desperate lie. The jury's verdict and Ian Stewart's fate. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict on February 22, 2017. Ian Stewart was found guilty of the murder of Helen Bailey, along with charges of perverting the course of justice and preventing a lawful burial. The verdict brought a sense of justice to Helen's family and friends, who had endured months of uncertainty and grief. When the judge addressed Stewart during sentencing, his words reflected the sheer cruelty of the crime. He described Stewart as a calculating and dishonest man who had preyed upon a vulnerable woman for financial gain. The judge pointed out that Stewart had shown no remorse throughout the trial, displaying a chilling lack of empathy for the woman he had lived with for years. Stewart was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 34 years before being eligible for parole. This meant that he would likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. As the verdict was read, Stewart remained emotionless, showing no signs of regret or distress. His lack of reaction only reinforced the belief that he had coldly and methodically planned Helen's murder without a second thought for the consequences for Helen's loved ones. While the sentencing could never bring her back, it at least ensured that Stewart would never have the chance to harm anyone else again. The financial motive behind the murder. One of the most disturbing aspects of this case was Stewart's clear financial motive. Helen Bailey was a wealthy woman, having earned millions from her successful writing career. Her estate, valued at over £3 million, became the ultimate prize that Stewart sought to claim through deception. In the months leading up to her death, Stewart had made several financial moves that hinted at his sinister intentions. He convinced Helen to update her will, making him the primary beneficiary. He also persuaded her to give him power of attorney, allowing him control over her assets. Investigators later discovered that Stewart had been experiencing financial difficulties. Despite living a comfortable lifestyle with Helen, he had debts and was struggling with money management. Instead of seeking legitimate solutions, he saw Helen's fortune as an easy way out. His plan was clear: drug and kill Helen, make it look like a disappearance, and then gradually claim her estate. However, his impatience and careless mistakes, such as suspicious internet searches and inconsistent alibis, ultimately led to his downfall. The cold and calculated nature of Stewart's crime shocked the public. It served as a grim reminder of how greed can drive individuals to commit unthinkable acts, even against those who trust them the most. While justice was served, the pain of losing Helen remains. However, her memory lives on, inspiring conversations about trust, safety, and the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships.